Hello and welcome to Yerushalmi Berachos Daf Chavtes in the Ozohar print. I want to talk about the halachas of Availus and some Shabbos and some comparative stuff, as well as a little bit of Agadat at the end. The Gemara here is coming off of the Mishnah that said that Rabbi Gamliel's wife died, and also we're going to see that Tevi died as well, the famous servant. There's a lot to say with their very interesting parallel Gemaras. And the Gemara says a couple of interesting things. So one of them is a brisa that says that an Aval and a Menuda that were walking on the road, they're allowed to use their shoes. And we know this is actually brought down in halacha that, for example, on Tisha B'Av or Yom Kippur, a person is not allowed to normally wear leather, but if they're traveling and they're trying to get somewhere on the road and they need it to protect their feet, it's actually allowed, which is probably halacha l'maisa. But when they get to the city, they have to take it off. Now, the implication is that an Avel is not allowed to wear leather or shoes, which was basically leather back then, and also the Menuda, which is interesting that somebody who's in Cherem can't wear it. Now, this is actually being stated in the Yerushalmi here clearly, seemingly the way we read it, and it's interesting to note because first of all, there's a parallel sugya in Moed Katan Daf Chav Daled and Aleph Ayin Sham, and there's a lot of discussion there. But what's interesting is that Rashi over there says that the Gemara never talks about whether a Menuda has to do Ne'ilas Asandal. Rashi leaves off that he's actually unsure whether a Menuda actually does, according to the Bavli need. But you see explicitly that the Yerushalmi says explicitly in this brisa that the Menuda does need to Ne'ilas Asandal to take off his shoes. Another interesting R that we were talking about was that the Gemara says B'makom shenogu lishol. Tell me it's a brisa, and again it's a Tosefta, like we mentioned many times. Tosefta actually is even more lengthy, but the brisa that we quote is B'makom shenogu lishol Availus b'Shabbos. And when they greet mourners on Shabbos, if that's the minhag, then sholim, we greet them. And Rahman Litzlan, the Tosefta is actually in Pesachim, Parak Gimel, and it actually says Makom shenogu shelo lishol ein sholim, which is kind of obvious, but it's interesting that it is important. And the Yerushalmi comments with Darum Shoalim, and in the south they greet mourners. And it seems to be giving validity to that minhag. Not necessarily that in the north they do that, but in the south they do greet. Now let's pause, because remember last time we spoke about yesterday how the Yerushalmi, when it refers to itself, it talks about itself as the north, because they were in the northern Eretz Yisrael, like the Charedim explained, and in the Darum they didn't have such high esteem for those scholars. But you see there's a balance, because here they're quoting them as a valid halacha. So it's an important ha'ara that you see there was respect there, just they held that they were perhaps bigger in posketing. The last thing is I want to bring this interesting brisa and talk about a couple of diukim. The Gemara says, Rav Hoshea Ruba, Azal L'chad Asra. Rav Hoshea the Great went to a certain place, and he saw the mourners on Shabbos. Now he wasn't from this place, B'Shalbon, and he greeted them. But he didn't know what to say, because remember, it depends on the minhag. Amar he said to them, Ani ene yodea minhag milkolchem. He basically said, I'm sorry, I don't know your custom, whether you greet mourners on Shabbos or not. Ela shalom aleichem kiminhag mikomenu. But peace upon you, according to the minhag of my place, where he was saying, I'm coming from. We know Chazal tell us that your person shouldn't go against the minhag, so that's what he wanted to do. And there's a certain sensitivity that's there. Now, I want to make a couple of comments. First of all, we know the famous line of when in Rome, do like Rome. So you might ask, is that Jewish? So it actually is. It's Medrash Rabbah, and the Medrash says, Azal L'Kipta, when you go, which is a city in Rome, when you're in, then you have to go by Holech B'nu Musa. You follow its rules. And the Ramchal brings this down in many, many places, especially in Das Tunos, and he basically says that just like we talk about how Hashem is knowing in Olam, his world, like the Pamalia down here, so there's an element that the mushal of how royalty runs has an impact on how the world runs as well. That's why it's important that a city has to have structure and has to have laws, etc. But there's a certain parallel that's there. Even Chazal tell us that a person should always take the opportunity to see a royal king, because then he'll understand, he'll get a physical manifestation of the great exaltedness that will be seen in the time of Mashiach. So you see that there's an importance of looking at what's going on in the world. The Ramchal takes it a lot deeper, etc. As you can imagine, that it talks about how Van Haga of Olam Haza works as well, but it's beyond the scope of this conversation. But the point is, that's what happens. So Rav Yossi Rabbi Chalafta Mishabach Durei Meir Kumi Tziporai. Rav Yossi Rabbi Chalafta praised Rameir and said, Adam Gadol, Adam Kadosh, Adam Snua. He's a great man, a holy man, and a modest person. So you see that he was really, really happy that he did that. Then later on, what happened? Another time happened. Chadzman. I'll just go through the English part. Basically, Rameir saw the people on Shabbos, and he greeted them. So then the people in Sipori protested to Rav Yossi ben Chalafta, and they said, "This is the man that you praised him." So he said, what are you complaining about? Well, yeah, I praised him. So they said to him, he saw mourners on Shabbos and he greeted them. So they said, so Rav Yossi answered, look how great he is. He's right. He's trying to teach you there's no Availus in Shabbos. As it says, Berachos Hashem hi ta'ashir, the blessing of Hashem enriches. Zu Berachos Shabbos, that's the bracha of Shabbos. V'lo Yosef atzev ima, and there shouldn't be depression, sadness, that's Availus. Like it says in the pasuk, Ne'etzav HaMelech al Beno, the king is saddened over his son that died. Atzev, you see, refers to Availus. So you see that he's giving respect to Shabbos. So yes, I am complimenting him. So I want to give a couple of R's on this. Very interesting Yerushalmi. So the Agadas Leo asks a couple of questions, but basically he brings down a very famous thing that Chazal tell us in the Bavli and Shabbos that the star that is sholit on Shabbos is called Shabsai, which is usually the evil one. It has some evil aspects to it. Okay? Ma'adim is Edom and Esav, etc. But Shabsai is usually has a negative. It's sholit on Shabbos, and he says that if people would work, then it would be bad for them because it shows bad things that happen. But Berachos Hashem hi ta'ashir, the bracha of Hashem, which is Shabbos, makes you rich. That the bittul malacha of Shabbos actually builds you. And again, from a psychological standpoint, taking a break one day is helpful. Like the Medrash says that Moshe was masakin Shabbos even in Mitzrayim, so that the Jews could rest on Shabbos. And he told Paro, "You'll get more productivity out of us for resting." There's a psychological part, but also throughout the years, Shabbos has kept us and taken care of us. Lo Yosef Atzav Ima obviously means that's referring to Availus. So the Maral's brother of Chaim Loi, so he wrote a sefer called Sefer HaChaim, and in it he brings a remez, which is not the Pashup Shot, but he also brings down that Shabsai is something that causes bad thoughts. So he says that that's the shot in the Zemer that we sing here, Hurim Mutarim. He says on Shabbos that there's a certain, not heter, that it's allowed, but it's referring to the fact that sometimes on Shabbos there's a bigger Yetzer Hara for that. And therefore there's some amount of understanding that Hashem has that Hu Yodei as Yitzreinu Zocher Gafar Anachnu, that we're not as culpable. Agav, that's not what it means at all in Pashup Shot. Yehurim Mutarim refers to hear her about Maaseh, about things on Shabbos. You're just not allowed. Dibor is Aser. That's what it's referring to. But according to his Pshat, that Yehurim are Mutar on Shabbos, you see that the next stanza is L'Shadei Chabanos, but a person should get married because that will help, which we know Chazal tell us the younger person marries, the better he's protected. But anyway, that's the Pshat with Shabsai, that it has this evil part, so to speak, on Shabbos. So what's the Pshat here? So in Hilchos Availus, whether a person says Shabbos Militzok, etc., or Shabbos Nachem, but the point is that what does Shabbos remind us? Shabbos reminds us that Hashem runs the world. That's the Makam Yunachim. That's the ultimate comfort is that how could a person ever give comfort when somebody passed away? It's a tragic thing, and we miss that person that passed away. But it's a perspective that Berachos Hashem hi ta'ashir, recognize that the Ribono Shalom runs the world, and that recognition that Shabbos brings is the Menuchas HaNefesh of life, to recognize that I don't understand it, and it's not what I wanted, and I wanted this person to live longer, and I'm in pain. And yes, we could still mourn them, but it's that ultimate recognition of the ultimate Shabbos, that Hashem knows what He's doing and Hashem runs the world. That's the ultimate way of giving an nechama to a person. Of course, the Aval has to understand that, but that's a pshat in stopping. If you look at Ritzei, that's the whole purpose of Shabbos, that it should be a time where we connect to Hashem and we recognize, Ribono Shalom, my life isn't the way I want it to be. This person is missing. This challenge is here. But nonetheless, I still connect to you and I recognize that you gave me my life and I will live the greatest life that I can live based on the way that you decide and you understand what is best for me. And that's the ultimate acceptance of Shabbos and the ultimate nichum avelim, so to speak, and nichum for anything that a person is struggling with in life. We should all be zocheh to live like that.